Hey, are you building your double materiality assessment based on different frameworks? Then this podcast episode is going to be super interesting to you because I'm going to talk to Sydney, who is helping companies with exactly this step, how to build a double materiality assessment based on different frameworks. So enjoy. Hey, Sydney, and I'm so glad to have you back on the AtlasZero podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've done since you last went on the podcast and how the world of EU compliance reporting developed for you?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel, and thanks to you and the team for having us again. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and hopefully share some knowledge for the great work you already do. So the past couple of months have been very exciting, both on the advisory side, or the strategy side of it, but also on the regulatory side. So for those who don't know, Bloom helps investors and businesses accelerate their sustainability journey. And on the investor side, we've been helping investors the past couple of months integrate ESG and sustainability into their investment strategies. And on the business side, we really see an increase in demand for CSRD related support, particularly in the form of double materiality assessments, where I think most companies are now. We've been really busy with helping companies gear up for 2026, and it's been really exciting.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, especially like the DMA part is something that I would like to dive in a little bit deeper because a lot of the questions that we are receiving right now are on this topic. So what do you feel is the current situation of the DMA? What are companies facing right now?
I think a lot of companies are facing confusion. That's probably also the reason why they're reaching out for a lot of external support, which is great, because it is something new, unexplored domain, and it's a lot to navigate, especially if you haven't been familiarized with sustainability reporting previously. So there's kind of two sides to the story. And there's one side, companies that have been reporting for long using different standards. And then there's the other side of the story that companies haven't had or done sustainability reporting at all in the past years. So for them, it's completely new. And we see that both these parties struggle. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. And for me, like I see quite a lot of companies that basically use some frameworks that they've done before to now develop further to the DMA. Do you experience the same? And can you give some examples?
Yeah,
Of that?
definitely. So there's, you might have heard of the ESG alphabet. So for those listening in, there might be, your LinkedIn page might be full of different ESG frameworks and standards, or the so-called alphabet soup. The European Sustainability Reporting Standard being one of many. So before the European Sustainability Reporting Standards were actually in place, there were quite some other frameworks that were widely adopted. One being the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which is SASB for short, and it was actually kind of the common go-to framework. We do see a lot of companies that have for many years been reporting on SASB framework and are now kind of in this phase where they need to navigate, okay, how do we use SASB or the other frameworks that we have been using to gear up for the CSRD compliance? And that's a discussion that we've been having with a lot of companies because most of our clients we have been serving have been doing that for the past couple of years. So that's also made us really think and have that discussion as to, okay, how can we really use the existing frameworks or the good stuff that we've already been doing for the past couple of years? How can we use those learnings and help build the case for a good double materiality assessment or good CSRD compliance as a whole?
Yeah. So for those companies that are not familiar with the SASB, like how can I imagine it? Is that like the DMA or is it like the ESRS? How can I compare it?
Yeah, great question. So essentially, SASB or Sustainability Accounting Standards Board is a voluntary disclosure standard. It's actually been in place for a very long time. And basically, SASB has two things. One thing is that it has a materiality map. So you can use that to find the most material ESG areas for your industry or the industries within your value chain. So for example, for the apparel industry, you can go to the SASB website and the materiality map. And the materiality map will tell you, okay, for the apparel industry, you need to think about disclosing on the management of chemicals or raw material sourcing or field labor conditions. And then you can just filter on the different industries. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that it has industry research briefs. So that kind of builds on the materiality map, and it really delves into impacts, risks, and opportunities within different sectors. So we'll have a research brief, for instance, for the maritime sector, for the consumer goods sector, forestry, any sector you can really think of, which is great because it really provides those different kind of starting base points for companies that actually haven't done anything on ESG and need to start doing it now. And so to go back to your question of if it's similar to the ESRS, yes and no, because SASB is a data-driven organization. Their work is built on years of research and stakeholder feedback, which is, core to the ESRS, where stakeholder engagement is also central to the way you perform your double materiality assessment. But in terms of differences, SASB is very heavily focused on it's voluntary. So, you don't have to do it. So that's also one area, as we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of companies that have never done sustainability reporting before because they simply haven't had to. But it still provides a good base to start on it. And the ESRS, of course, is regulated, so you have to do it for those companies in scope. So that's kind of the main difference. That being said, by SASB can still, like I said, really guide companies in doing that impact, risk, and opportunities assessment, but also help them with the wider double materiality assessment if this is all new to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to dive into that, like how this framework can help like a double materiality assessment or the CSRD in a minute. But maybe before we dive into that, are there any other frameworks like the SASB or something else that we would have to mention at this point?
Yes, so there's many more, but a great example I would like to pinpoint is the MSCI. I actually don't know what the acronym stands for as we speak, but MSCI is essentially also, it's more focused for investors actually. So they do a lot of investment research and they provide ratings on ESG. But as part of their research, they also have a publicly available ESG materiality matrix, which is actually similar to the SASB one. So you can look up the different industries, again, your own industry as a business or those within your value chain, and then it filters out the material impact area or the material ESG themes for particular businesses that you want to look into. And that tool is extremely valuable for businesses, again, to really understand what's happening, not with only in my operations, but across the industries that I have exposure to within my value chain.
Okay. So let's say a company either previously worked with the SASB or with the MSCI. So how would the process look like if they now start to build a double materiality assessment on top? Can you maybe guide us through the process a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So we typically, as I said earlier, we've helped many clients with this. So we typically take the 7-step process. And it's kind of similar for companies that have reported on SASB before, but also for companies that are completely new to the CSRD or sustainability reporting as a whole. And the reason why we try to embed SASB and MSCI and other frameworks that have good research is that it really helps that data-driven approach. And so that 7-step that I'm referring to, the first step is really context. So similar to, I think, most of the DMA processes out in the market, it's really defining the entity's activities, what's happening across the value chain, business relationships that play into that, and identifying the key stakeholders. Then step 2 is kind of the initial assessment. So we've developed a tool which is publicly available, and you can kind of plug and play. So you fill in your industries, not just your own industry, but industries you've got exposure to across the value chain. And then you also link your exposure to that sector in terms of your sales or revenue within those industries. So that's the second step. You do your initial assessment, kind of linking your comp and sales to the SASB and MSCI, and then they tell you the impact, risks, and opportunities for those different industries. The third step is kind of stakeholder engagement. So based on the initial assessment, you can kind of steer your stakeholder engagement, gather their perspectives, add to what you already have. The fourth step is the severity assessment. So obviously in line with the ESRS requirements, you look at the severity of different topics, determine the severity of potential and actual impacts, and then also look at the financial implications. And then Step 5 is really integration and validation. So you combine all the outcomes and really ensure that data-driven approach again. So you look at what have your stakeholders said, what did SASB and MSCI tell me that's relevant, kind of find the missing links and complete it from there. And at this stage, you also might want to rethink about engaging your stakeholders again to kind of make sure you got extra validation that you're taking the right approach, because that's sometimes quite underestimated, the importance of having that. And then the sixth step is really assurance. So you want to involve some external expert to review and validate the findings, again, in line with the ESRS requirements to assure your sustainability report. And then finally, number 7 is continuous monitoring. And we always like to emphasize that the double materiality assessment or the CSRD reporting is not just something that happens once a year. It's something that is a continuous improvement thing. And that's also why I've created this tool to help companies really make it continuous and not just something that they do now and don't look at for the next year. Something that actually has continuous dialogue within the company, but also with external stakeholders.
Okay. Yeah, this sounds like quite an elaborate process.
Yeah.
So when companies do that, like just from like your experience, how much of the DMA or the topics required by the DMA are covered by this process and by the knowledge you have from previous standards? Or like, how can I anticipate this? Is this doing the majority of the work? Is this some like good add-on? How can I interpret it?
The tool or the SASB and MSCI?
So let's say I've did the SASB before, and then I'm basically going through the process. I'm trying to like get as much information that I previously collected already to like build my DMA on top of that. So how much is this previous knowledge, the previous work that I put in, helping me in terms of like creating a DMA? Then?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of bridging the gap between let's say a company is already reporting on sustainability, it's kind of bridging the gap between what they're already doing and what they're required to do. Because essentially the research done by SASB and MSCI does identify the impacts, risks, and opportunities across, the entire value chain. And that kind of does feed into the double materiality assessment. So again, it kind of feeds into it. That's also, again, where we have the set and step process. It's just a component of it, but unfortunately, it's not the silver bullet. Companies still need to perform the DMA, but this can really ensure that data-driven approach. Make sure you actually have research backing why X is relevant to your business and not that topic. And that's where, again, the SASB and MSCI research really fits in to build that discussion. And again, not only within operations, but also, with what's happening across the value chain, to be able to sit down with your suppliers and say, hey, you're operating in this industry, you need to think about climate change, your ecological impacts for your workers or be your customers, and be able to steer that discussion there. So that's where this tool not only is useful for CSRD reporting, but also as a more strategic thing to think about business conduct, which is also part of the CSRD. So there's multifacets how it fits into not only the double materiality assessment, but also to the wider CSRD compliance and sustainability strategy.
Okay. And one more thing I would like to ask about, because with the SASB, you mentioned that it has like industry focus and is like somewhat industry specific. So how does this translate to the double materiality assessment, where companies look quite industry agnostic onto like the whole set of things and then basically narrow down?
Yeah, so essentially, I think it really helps, again, unravel what's relevant within the business activities that you have. So really understanding what's relevant within for this business activity, for that business activity, and be able to really level that down to sit down and look at the impacts, risks, and opportunities and filter it in that discussion.
Okay. And from your personal experience with this process and with the whole creating a DMA so far, what is the thing that companies seem to struggle with the most so far?
I think it's where to start with the DMA, and to be fair, the entire CSRD. So not knowing which ESRS topics are relevant and how they're linked to existing reporting practices and the gaps between current reporting and CSRD requirements. And I think that's also why we're having this discussion today, is to think about, okay, what resources are out there to be able to help us? And that doesn't have to be an external expert, but it could also just be looking at SASB or MSCI, really understand the research that's been driving this sustainability reporting agenda for years already. So yeah, we really see that struggle in terms of, where to start. But yeah, I think the goal is really to showcase that there are some starting points out there. It's a really useful tool to help you, get started.
Yeah. No, I definitely see this as well. I talk to a lot of companies that are in some sort of paralysis, like they know that they have to do something, but the problem seems so big and there's so many different choices and decisions to make. So that companies like don't really move forward, or they're like only moving forward super slow. So I definitely see that like doing the first step and just getting started is super, super difficult.
Yeah.
And on the other side, what is like one of the biggest learnings that you have so far? What is something where you were like, oh, okay, like if we do it this way, we can really help companies the most, or if companies approach it in this way, they have such an advantage. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah. So we, like I said, I've worked with quite some companies gearing them up for the CSRD, and particularly at the DMA, which is where most companies are at now. I think the biggest learning is that the CSRD is not as scary as it sounds. I think a lot of companies are like, oh, another reporting obligation. We need to hire more resources. We need to devote costs and time to this. But essentially, it's actually a strategic exercise, and to be able to really sit down and talk about, the topics, the impacts, risks, and opportunities that really matter, not only just internally, but also across your value chain, is just so valuable. Not just from a compliance perspective, but also from a strategic one. So I think that's kind of the biggest learning, is to shift the mindset with the people we work with, but also just the broader people that are in scope, on businesses in scope of the CSRD, and really ensure they're equipped with the right toolkits to start having that discussion. So that's also the reason why we've made a guide available on our website to help businesses kind of sit down and look at, okay, where are we now? So the guide actually explains the CSRD, but it also explains what steps you need to take if, perform a gap analysis, and what such a gap analysis looks like.
Mm. Oh yeah, that sounds super helpful. Can you send me the link so I can put it into the show
I'll
notes?
definitely, and I'll also send the link of our Double Materiality Assessment tool so that people can take a listen or look at that after this.
Yeah, yes, please, because I get asked quite often about like helpful material and what I can recommend and how companies can get started. So I think a lot of companies will be very happy about this.
Great. And we'll also make sure to send the double materiality assessments from SASB and MSCI so that people can learn as well. It's also part of our guide. So that guide will also help you through how to approach that with you.
Okay, perfect. I feel like we have quite a list, so please send them to me and I will just put them into the show notes so that everybody can find the things that they are looking for. Okay. Thank you so much, Sydney, for taking the time again. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that we can repeat this again and then make a series out of this, that we talk like, I don't know, every quarter or something, and we discuss the latest developments.
That'd be great. Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for having us again.
Hey, if you come this far, thank you very much for listening to the AtlasZero podcast. If you are interested in this topic, we just launched the AtlasZero Navigator, which is basically a product compiled of all the interviews we ever done, all the materials we either created or collected, comprised into one product. It basically helps you to understand all the sustainability reporting requirements of the EU, and we really think it's super helpful. So if you're interested, definitely check out the link below and check out our product. And also, and I have to ask this, please like and subscribe to our channel. Like, it helps us a ton to reach more people. And at the end, our goal is to help as many companies as possible. So you can help us a little bit in achieving that. Thank you very much. And I hope I see you very soon.